December 1941. The North African desert stretched endlessly beneath a cold night sky. No cities, no lights, no front line. Only sand, wind, and war. Just weeks earlier, the newly formed Special Air Service had attempted its first large-scale mission, a parachute raid deep behind enemy lines. It ended in disaster. Men were scattered by a violent sandstorm. Equipment was lost. Many were killed or captured before even reaching their targets. For the British High Command, the verdict seemed obvious. The SAS experiment had failed. But for one man, Lieutenant David Stirling, the failure proved something else. The idea was sound. The method was wrong. And in December 1941, the SAS would attempt its second operation, a mission that would redefine how special forces operated in modern warfare. When survivors of the first raid returned across the desert, exhausted and broken, the unit's future hung by a thread. Official reports questioned the value of parachuting into the open desert. Senior officers doubted the reliability of such small raiding parties. Some within the command structure were already preparing to dissolve the unit. Stirling refused. He argued that the problem was not the objective, striking enemy airfields, but the insertion method. Parachutes in desert wind were uncontrollable. Scattering men across miles of darkness destroyed coordination before the mission even began. The solution would not be more training. The solution would be mobility. At this critical moment, Stirling turned to a unit already operating hundreds of miles behind enemy lines, the Long-Range Desert Group. The LRDG were navigators of the impossible. Using modified trucks loaded with fuel, water, weapons, and spare parts, they crossed terrain that most armies considered impassable. They navigated by stars and compass. They understood desert winds and dune formations. They survived where others would perish. Stirling proposed a partnership. Instead of dropping from the sky, the SAS teams would be transported across the desert by LRDG vehicles. They would arrive unseen, strike at night, and vanish before sunrise. It was a simple change, but it would change everything. The mission focused on Axis airfields along the Libyan coast, particularly Tamat and nearby bases supporting Rommel's Axis Corps. German and Italian aircraft based there provided reconnaissance and bombing support against British forces. Destroying them would reduce enemy air superiority. But these airfields were not near the front. They were hundreds of miles inside Axis-controlled territory. To reach them meant crossing a vast expanse of desert with no guarantee of rescue. If discovered, there would be no quick reinforcement, no evacuation. Only sand and enemy patrols. The convoy moved at night. LRDG trucks rolled slowly over hardened desert crust, headlights off, engines carefully maintained to avoid breakdown. During daylight hours, vehicles were hidden among dunes or rocky depressions to avoid enemy reconnaissance aircraft. Navigation was precise and relentless. Drivers measured distance by odometer and bearing by compass. Stars provided orientation when the sky was clear. Fuel had to be rationed exactly. A miscalculation could leave the convoy stranded, a death sentence in hostile territory. Every mile deeper into Axis land increased the risk. But unlike the chaotic parachute drop weeks earlier, this mission felt controlled, disciplined, quiet. The SAS teams carried a new weapon, the Lewis bomb. Small, lightweight, devastating. Designed specifically for aircraft sabotage, it could be placed quickly and set with a timed fuse. Each man carried multiple charges. The objective was not to hold ground, it was to destroy machines and disappear.
On the night of 16th December 1941, the SAS teams approached Tamet Airfield. The moon hung low over the desert. Engines were cut miles away. From that point, the men advanced on foot. There were no dramatic speeches, no battle cries, only silence. The SAS cut through perimeter wire where possible, or slipped through weakly guarded sections. Axis aircraft stood exposed on the sand-covered runways. Bombers, fighters, fuel trucks parked nearby. Each aircraft represented air power, reconnaissance, strafing, bombing. Each one was a target. Working in small teams, the raiders moved methodically. One man placed a charge near the engine, another set the timer. 30 seconds, 1 minute. They moved to the next aircraft, then the next, all under the threat of discovery. A single sentry raising alarm could trigger a firefight they could not win. But speed and surprise were on their side. When the SAS withdrew into the darkness, the desert remained silent for a few moments longer. Then, the first explosion erupted. A flash, a concussion, then another and another. Aircraft burst into flames in sequence across the airfield. Fuel ignited. Secondary explosions shattered the night. From a distance, the raiders watched the fire spread. They did not stay to fight. They had no intention of engaging ground forces. Their objective was destruction, not occupation. Within minutes, they were already moving away from the target. The most dangerous part of any raid is not the attack, it is the escape. Axis forces scrambled in confusion. Sentry lights cut through smoke. Vehicles moved toward the perimeter. But the desert beyond the airfield was vast and dark. By the time organized pursuit began, the SAS teams were already beyond immediate reach. Reuniting with LRDG vehicles, they began the long journey back across the desert. The mission had succeeded. Exact numbers vary among historical records, but dozens of aircraft were destroyed or severely damaged during the December raids. For a small force numbering only a few dozen men, the impact was significant. Even more important than material damage was the psychological effect. Axis commanders realized that rear area bases were vulnerable. Distance no longer guaranteed safety. The desert was no longer a barrier. It had become a highway for raiders. The success of this second operation reshaped SAS tactics permanently. Parachute insertions in desert conditions were largely abandoned. Instead, mobility became doctrine. Soon, the SAS began modifying American Willis Jeeps. Windshields removed to reduce glare. Extra fuel tanks mounted on every surface. Twin Vickers K machine guns installed for overwhelming firepower. These vehicles would become legendary. But the foundation was laid in December 1941. The lesson was clear: speed, surprise, simplicity. Withdrawal before engagement. The SAS was designed not to hold ground, it was designed to strike and vanish. The December raids did more than destroy aircraft. They validated Stirling's vision. High command could no longer dismiss the unit as a failed experiment. Instead of dissolution, the SAS received expansion. More recruits, more equipment, more targets. Over the following months, desert raids intensified. Airfields across Libya and beyond were struck repeatedly. The myth of the invisible raiders began to spread among Axis troops. Engines were heard at night, explosions followed, and by dawn, nothing remained but smoke. The Second SAS operation was not the largest raid of the war. It was not the most dramatic, but it was the turning point. It proved that small, highly trained teams could penetrate deep behind enemy lines and inflict disproportionate damage. It demonstrated that mobility could replace mass, and it ensured the survival of a unit that would go on to influence Special Forces doctrine worldwide. From the deserts of North Africa in December 1941, a new kind of warfare emerged. Silent, mobile, unpredictable. The SAS had failed once, but in the desert, they learned quickly. And from that lesson, a legend was born.